Hi all. Um, it's so nice talking to you all again. Apologies, I have had strep throat for a little over a week now, unfortunately. Luckily, do not have COVID-19, and I'm feeling a little bit better now, but I apologize as my voice is a little bit scratchy as we talk today. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the three S's of oppression, which will be helpful for our next conversation around COVID-19 and immigration, specifically in Tacoma. So I want to get into it because the three S's, it's almost kind of like five because there's some different ways of saying some of these things. So structural or societal oppression, it's a formalization of the set of institutional, historical, cultural, and interpersonal practices within the society. And more often than not, it puts a social group or an ethnic group in a better position to succeed. But at the same time, it also disadvantages another group in a very consistent, constant manner that develops between the group over a period of time, these large disparities. So it's like when you see racial disparities or these huge wealth gaps. We have one of the largest wealth gaps that we've ever had in this country, especially right now with COVID-19. So an example is the society is structured in a way that excludes substantial numbers of people from minority backgrounds from taking part in social institutions. Everybody just kind of think of what that may look like. What exactly does that mean? Substantial numbers of people from minority backgrounds from taking part in social institutions. One thing that I can think of specifically is actually gender, how women have been discriminated against from being in certain either social institutions or academic institutions or professional institutions. Like think about the last time you saw a female engineer or a woman, in banking institutes. Think about those. Now let's go down to systemic. So that's defined as something that impacts everything. So the whole system, it's system-wide. Things like systemic racism. It's a prejudice and discrimination that's based solely on race, and it occurs in and affects the whole societal system of a nation. So something that's systemic, some systemic racism, systemic sexism, systemic ableism, these are things that impact the entire system. So that's the entire system of our society, our government, our academics, but they are all impacted by these things. And even though there's some parts that may be impacted less, or some parts that we have underneath the microscope that we're trying to fix, things like education, where there's a lot of folks talking about inequalities, maybe there more than in other places, it's still impacting the whole system. And because it's happening in one part of the system, it impacts the entire system. And then lastly, we get to systematic or strategic. And what makes this different than systemic is that it's oppression by the institution or it's the fixed plan. Systemic means it impacts everything. Systematic means that it's the institution or the plan that creates the oppression. So examples are laws that are created to have unequal treatment of specific social groups or identity groups. So that means specifically laws like laws that check IDs. That group that would be impacted the most would be folks who are immigrants or those who are from non-English speaking countries. And those are put in place to benefit another group or disadvantage another group or both simultaneously. Or another example that we see a lot is dog whistling. And this is going to be interesting, especially with this election that we have right now. And it's described as the cold calculation of expressing racially loaded ideas in coded terms, so i.e. inner city kids or illegal alien in lieu of communities of color. These loaded words are used to invoke emotions or used to bias the conversation in a certain way. But these are the three S's or the five, depending on how you want to use them.